Okay, let's talk about the US Constitution. Before we talk about the Constitution, we have to rewind and we have to talk about the Articles of Confederation. Once the colonists won the American Revolution against the British, they quickly adopted a form of government called the Articles of Confederation. Unfortunately, though, the Articles of Confederation were poorly designed. The Articles of Confederation led to a very weak national government. This is what many of the colonists wanted, but it sets up for an unsustainable outcome. The three main weaknesses are that states had more power than the national government had no way to tax or collect money, meaning they couldn't raise any money, and lastly, the government was poorly structured. There was only one legislative branch with no executive branch or judicial branch like we have today. Again, the articles were designed this way because the colonists were afraid of a strong government that would abuse their power. Here you can see more weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation and what the outcome was. Obviously, no power to tax means no money. No national executive means no way to enforce the laws. There was a single legislator. That means one vote equals one state. Unequal representation for the people. There was no judicial or national court. That was problems with interstate relations. No checks and balances, which was super important. There was no equal money, meaning that different states had their own types of money. There was no way to raise an army, which meant we had no defense. And again, the government was dominated by the states. So the states had more power than the national government. All of these weaknesses that were created in the Articles of Confederation, it just led to a government that wouldn't work. Likely, if we would have kept something like this, the United States wouldn't be here today. So that's why we end up having the Constitution. With all of the issues in the articles, the states came together and they drafted a new document, the U.S. Constitution. Through many compromises and hours of debate, the Constitution was created and deemed the supreme law of the land. The supreme law of the land is super important. That means nothing trumps the Constitution. Supreme law of the land, very, very important. James Madison is credited with coming up with many of the principles in this document that address the needs of the nation and fix the mistakes of the Articles of Confederation. So, the United States, we learned from our mistakes and we grew, and that's where the Constitution comes from. Let's discuss some of the principles of the U.S. Constitution and the Enlightenment period where a lot of those ideas came from, starting with popular sovereignty. This idea comes from Rousseau. Popular sovereignty refers to the power of the people. The power comes from the will of the people. A key principle is separation of powers, which comes from Montesquieu. This idea is what gave us three branches of government. These are three separate branches of government that we still have today: the executive, legislative, and judicial branch. Each branch has its own job, own power, they have their own set of rules, and they have checks over each other. The checks and balance part is crucial. This makes sure that no branch becomes too powerful over another branch. The greater good idea also comes from the Enlightenment, and this means that when laws are passed, they should be passed to have the most amount of positive impact on the people. Freedom of religion is a big one that we have pride in our country, and James Madison spent a lot of his career studying the importance of freedom of religion. This means that there is no national religion and that everyone has the right to practice their religion freely without persecution. This comes from Voltaire and John Locke. And then lastly, we have trial by jury. This is also a foundational principle in our Constitution. This means you are innocent until you are proven guilty. This comes from Beccaria. Let's review everything we just talked about. The Articles of Confederation had many flaws and issues that were fixed by the U.S. Constitution, which got many of its principles from the Enlightenment period, so a long time ago with a lot of philosophers. The Constitution was a set of compromises among different sides to help create a stable nation that can last. The Article's main screw ups were the fact that the government didn't have power to enforce laws, they had no ability to raise money, and the government lacked power to tax. There was no common currency, meaning that states had their own money, and there was no executive or judicial branch to enforce laws. And lastly, the states were stronger than the national government. So those were all big screw ups with the Articles. The U.S. Constitution fixes these by number one, making the national government and the U.S. Constitution the supreme law of the land. They gave the government the power to tax, which allowed them to raise and standardize money. They created an executive branch, which is in charge of carrying out laws, and a judicial branch, which is all of our jury system with all of our courts. They guaranteed separation of powers and freedom of religion. The Constitution was not and is not perfect today. To make it a better document, as needs change, they made a plan which allows the U.S. to add amendments to the U.S. Constitution. There are currently 27 amendments, but more than 11,000 have been proposed. So they made it really, really hard to change the national laws. So we have 27 amendments today, but over 11,000 have been proposed. So they wanted to make it really, really hard to change it. So again, the U.S. Constitution, we still have it today. It's our national laws, and it's one of our most important founding documents.